Tinker, channeling Shania Twain. I've been asking for 4 years to have that song sung on Mother's Day, and Angela Tinker finally took it on.
Hey.
She's not just another pretty face. I know what it takes to be a mom. I know what it takes to be a woman in today's culture, and what all the amazing things that are available to each one of us, and how much strength it takes to be all that we can be. So I just really want to acknowledge you for that. We'll have an opportunity to acknowledge the dads and the men in the room on Father's Day. We have a very special service planned for you guys. Our men's circle is going to actually be providing the service. We have 2 lovely men, Jeff Fritz and Michael Lindy, going to be giving the talk because, yeah, I can't really talk about being a dad, sorry. I only talk about being a mom. So that'll be really special as well. It seems very appropriate that on Mother's Day that we are talking about, are you listening from the heart? That is so, it seems so appropriate on Mother's Day for us to be talking about heart-centered living. This is the second section in our book for the month, The Untethered Soul. And we're going to really take a moment to explore the heart. And not just the human heart, not just our emotional heart, but also the spiritual heart and the energy that is available to us when our heart is open and when we are living from the heart. And you know, I was thinking about that. I've been very excited about this series of talks. I've actually been thinking about them for quite a while. And as we come to this one, I love the way that heart fell on Mother's Day, because we think of the mom so often as the heart of the home, don't we? Stereotypically, that's the case. Hopefully, in many cases, that was actually true for us, that mom was sort of the heart, the glue at the center of the home. Certainly, that was my experience in my home. If I were to talk about my dad and how he raised me, it would be a very, very different story than when I talk about my mom and how she raised me. And my mother was very much the glue in our family, and she was very much the peacekeeper and the manager of all the volatility that I grew up with in my family, with my father and my sister. And she was the heart in that space. And when her heart went out of it, and she couldn't do it anymore, and she had divorced my father, she was no longer able to keep that heart space alive for herself in the home. And so, again, really thinking about this notion that we have this idea, this image of mom as the heart of the home. So my son called me up last week and he said, "Hey Mom, I can't be with you on Mother's Day. If I haven't bragged enough on him already, I'll just say it one more time." He graduated from Fire Academy a couple of weeks ago, which was really exciting, and he got a not a full-time job, but a permanent job at the fire department where he's been volunteering for this last year. And he has, man, I'll tell you what, you want to see somebody absolutely setting a goal, living a plan, and manifesting his dreams. It's been just unbelievable to watch him do this. And so he has this job now, and as a firefighter, he works once every 3 days. And you work once every 3 days, and it doesn't matter. Christmas, holidays, Mother's Day, birthday, you're working once every 3 days. So it fell on Mother's Day, and he called me up, "Hey Mom, I'm working on Mother's Day, I'm so sorry." I thought, oh my God, you get gold points just even for calling me and saying that. Gold stars for that one. He said, "So when can we get together?" Well, pretty busy, both of us pretty busy, lots going on, so we determined last Friday, 2 days ago, we would get together for lunch. And he took me to lunch, he paid the bill. Wow, well, I can get used to this. I'm liking this a lot. And so, for all of us who have had teenagers and young adult children, that really, it's just really all about them, isn't it? And so we get together and we're starting, and he's launching about, what's happening with this brand new job and how it's going and things that are going on at home for him and yada, 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 and story, and we had this wonderful lunch and we talked and it was all very interesting and exciting. And then lunch was, lunch was being taken away. I said, "Oh good, okay, so it's Mother's Day, enough about you, now let's talk about me." Because actually it's Mother's Day, and so I'm your mom, so now it's your turn, you have to talk about me. And he looked at me and he said, "Okay, Mom, So say something about, you know, me being your mom, and this is Mother's Day. You should celebrate me. Because I did actually notice that there were no flowers or card. However, there was a lunch, so he got some brownie points for that. And so he said, gosh, you know, he said, there's a million things I could say that were so wonderful about having you as my mom. But the most important thing he said, you raised me sane. Yeah, and I went, wow. He said, yeah. He said, you know, you raised me sane. And watch what, you know, my friends have all gone through high school and now, and their parents and their families and all the stuff that's going on. And he said, Mom, I'm so grateful you raised me sane. Well, of course, I raised him in science mind. He was, you know, been a science mind minister for almost 30 years. So he was raised in this philosophy. He was raised in this community. He got that grounding and those principles, whether he knows it or not, he's living them. He's living proof of them. And it was such a gift when he said that to me, and I said, wow, I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful that that was your experience. That was, you know, that was certainly my intention. He said, and so then he started talking about, yeah, all those other moms, you know, and this story about this mom, and that story about that dad, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, enough about them, it's Mother's Day, more about me. Okay, he said, there were a million things you could say about me. You said one, I want at least another one, could I have at least another one? And, you know, we play this game at birthdays and all the time, and we want to, you know, just really acknowledge people and acknowledge each other. And so, and he said, you know, he said, one of my favorite things about growing up is that you and Susan, the house was always open to my friends. I loved the fact that I could bring them home for dinner. And we got to tell them stories about dinners that we had all through middle school and high school. And we never knew, Susan and I never knew. We never knew whether it was going to be the 3 of us for dinner. It could be 4, it could be 7, it could be as much as 10. 3, 4, 5 nights a week. We would have these dinners, and all these kids in the house kind of running around doing their thing. And I didn't know this actually really until he said it on Friday. He said, you know, my friends loved to come over to our house. They loved having dinner with us. Well, we actually made real food, and we like sat down and eat it. We sat down at the table to eat it, and they had knives and forks, and they were required to use their napkins. They were, and I was pretty, you know, specific about these things. And it was so wonderful to hear that from my son, because, you know, that wasn't my experience growing up. That was not my experience. I did not want my friends I figured it out somewhere in my early elementary school that I did not want to bring my friends home to my family for dinner. Oh no, that was bad, because you never actually knew what my father or my sister might do, and what my mother would have to deal with. And so I didn't bring people home. If I slept over somebody else's house, that was great. Nobody was ever invited over to my house. There was a couple years after my parents got divorced where that opened up quite a bit when we lived with just my mother. And then my mother got remarried, and that changed again. And I was no longer very interested in bringing people home. And of course, I left home then. By 15, I could no longer stay there. And so I had made a very deliberate decision that I wanted it to be different for my son. I wanted him to feel comfortable in the house, and I wanted him to like to bring his friends over. And we really extended ourselves, and we really worked very hard to make that experience possible for him. And so it was really wonderful to hear that. And it was really exceptionally powerful for me because I've really been on a journey for this last, I don't know, 3, 4 years or so, really focusing on open-heartedness. You know, I have laughed with you and told you I walk the Jnana Yoga path, which is the path of the intellect. It's lovingly called the you can't get there from here path, because you can't actually intellect your way to the divine. You can understand and move up to a certain point, and then hopefully there's a push that launches us out into oneness. And that certainly has been my experience. And yet it was very clear to me that there was something not fully grown for me, especially in this desire to be so open-hearted at home, to make this space for my son to really experience safety and love and nurturing and all of those things, and finding out just how radically challenging that was when he was a teenager. I didn't always feel open-hearted toward him at all, actually. It was very challenging. I'm sure he didn't feel very open-hearted towards me either. And as we know, that can be a very challenging time. And so I really was experiencing this idea that I really want to focus on that, and I'm not feeling as open-hearted as I would like to be, because I want to be that heart space, not only in my home, but in my life. Everywhere that I go, I'd like to be creating that kind of environment. And as I was exploring that for myself, what I realized is that, yeah, there was a lot of places where that wasn't the case. I actually wasn't feeling open-hearted, and I wasn't feeling like I was creating that space in a lot of places in my life. So in doing a lot of personal work and a lot of contemplation about this, just recently, very recently actually, it has been revealed to me as I've been doing some exercises and processes, as I've been exploring my own childhood and my own past. What really came up for me not too long ago is this amazing revelation of how completely unsafe I felt in my own home. Actually, when I was about 5, I seemed to have made a decision to simply wall myself off. And I've been doing a lot of exploration around this in the recent weeks and months. And what I realized is that, yeah, somewhere inside there was this really magical child. I was one of those kids who saw things and knew things, and I was just flinging myself into life with wild abandon. And I was in love with life. I lived life in Technicolor as a child in this massively amazing world. And what I've learned, what I've realized, what I can hear is how I was told over and over and over again that the world I was living in was nonsense. It's nonsense. It's just nonsense. Stop talking nonsense. You need to stop talking nonsense. Don't. In German, the word's Quatsch. It's all Quatsch. Quatsch, it's Quatsch, don't say that, don't talk about it, there's more important things to do, it's important, you gotta get the chores done, you gotta get this done, you gotta do this, you gotta do this. It was all, and my sister and my father were so emotionally volatile. My mother actually told me years later, actually about 10 years ago, she thought I was a neglected child. My mother and my sister and my dad took so much of her time to manage their emotionality and their volatility and their rage and all of that. She was so happy that I would go and sit in the grass and read my book and have my little fantasy world and really be totally self-contained. What I didn't realize was in that total self-containment that I had actually just created a little space inside where nobody could get in because it wasn't safe. It wasn't safe. I discovered that I was completely unsafe in my own home. I wonder how many of us have made decisions like that. Those are the decisions that we make someplace really deep back there. We're unsafe, we're unworthy, we're not okay, something we do isn't right, we're stupid. And whatever messages we received when we were somewhere 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, we didn't have the skill sets not to believe that. And so we begin to build a protection mechanism around ourselves. We begin to protect ourselves. And we close off those parts of us that don't feel safe. We close them off. And we learn how to manage the world in a different way. The challenge, of course, that we're going to talk about today is that when we close ourselves off, rather than keeping the world out, what happens is that we keep ourselves in. Do you see? Rather than keeping the world out, actually what happens is we keep ourselves in. We keep ourselves locked away from the truth of our being. We keep ourselves locked away from life itself. Remember last week we asked the fundamental question, who am I? Who am I? I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my feelings. I'm not my body. I'm not this sense of needing to be protected. We aren't any of these things. We are actually radiant, magnificent beings of love and light, playful otters of the universe. Our job is to simply grow and live and express the truth of our being to the fullest that we possibly can. And yet when we lock ourselves away through some protection mechanism, whatever it is, we shut out this powerful, infinite reality, this infinite energy that we live in. This infinite energy that we live in is moving through all of creation. We know this from the mystics of all ages, and we know it from our science today, that we live in this infinite energy. We have energy centers that are constantly in relationship to this infinite energy. They're allowing this infinite energy in, and they're utilizing it, and they're pumping it back out again. In some ancient systems, it's called the chakras. Lots of other ways it can be described as the chi. And we might call it spirit here in the science of mind. And we have this constant relationship with this infinite energy. But when our energy centers are closed and blocked and constricted in some way, we don't experience that infinite energy. We become depressed and tired, and life feels meaningless and hopeless, and there's just no point in it anymore. And we just sort of, we just sort of kind of go through the motions of our days, and yeah, whatever. And that is the experience of having our energy centers closed and not having the availability, this infinite energy available to us. And the reason we're talking about this right now is because our heart is actually the largest energy center that we have, and it's the most profound mechanism, and both physical and spiritual mechanism that we have to experience this infinite reality that we are. And so when I began to really think about this open-heartedness, one of the things that I discovered for myself is that since my mother passed away in 2006, and you've heard me talk about this before, I spent years experiencing worsening heart palpitations to the point where I had heart palpitations virtually continually. And they couldn't figure out what to do. I got off all kinds of caffeine and sugar, and they did this and that. Nobody really knew what was going on. And what I was exposed to this thing called heart math. And they talk about in heart math, they talk about heart coherence. Heart coherence is when our heart is moving with the infinite energy of the universe in a coherent manner, and everything is resonating, and we're vibrating at the appropriate rate, and all of that is moving effortlessly and openly. And it dawned on me like literally as if I'd been shot between the eyes. How can I be open-hearted and coherent if I'm having all these physical symptoms, all these heart palpitations? And it was simply an outward sign of the closed experience. Now, you may not be having heart palpitations, but I guarantee you that if you are experiencing that place of being closed in your life, if you are pulling back, constricting, closing down, shutting off in some form or fashion, then that heart space it's unable to be coherent in the resonance of the energy that's available to us. I want to show you two really small little clips from Heart Math. We want to give a big shout out to them. They do amazing work.
Over the past 18 years, our research center has investigated heart-brain interactions, how the heart and the brain communicate with each other and how that affects consciousness and our perceptions. One of the things we identified in our research was the state we now call coherence. And what we found was that when we're feeling positive emotions, like we're really appreciating the sunset, or really feeling love or compassion or care for someone, that the heart beats out a very different message. The heart generates by far the largest rhythmic electromagnetic field produced in the body. And what we've now found is that if we look at the spectrum analysis of the magnetic field radiated by the heart, that emotional information is actually encoded and modulating into those fields. So by learning to shift our emotions, that's changing the information we're encoding into the magnetic fields radiated by the heart, and that can impact those around us. We are fundamentally and deeply interconnected with each other and the planet itself, and what we do individually really does count and matters.
So we talked about in there that, that the emotionality is what lodges in the heart, right? And in the slideshow, you saw that one slide, that the heart has short and long-term memory of things that have happened, experiences that we've had. And they get lodged in our heart. So for me, this sense of unsafety has been lodged in my heart for, well, since I was 4, since I was 5. And now what happens is that anytime I feel unsafe, anytime there's something that feels a little bit out of whack for me, you see that that stored memory gets activated. And what happens is, what? We shut down. When the stored memory of the experience or the feeling or something that is even close to resonating with that which has become stored in our heart, when that gets triggered in some form or fashion, we go right back to the idea that we had, oh, I'm unsafe, and we do exactly what it is that we have learned to do to close ourselves off, protect ourselves, and shut ourselves down. So the question is about opening the heart. And I just really getting so much out of this book. I hope that you're reading it right along with us. This is The Untethered Soul, and he says, consciousness is one of the great mysteries of life. Inner energy is another. Every movement of your body, every emotion you have, every thought that passes through your mind is an expenditure of energy. Creating thoughts, holding on to thoughts, recalling thoughts, generating emotions, controlling emotions, and even disciplining powerful inner drives all require a tremendous expenditure of energy. Where does all this energy come from? Why is the energy there sometimes, and at other times you feel completely drained? Well, you'll see, if you watch carefully, is that you have a phenomenal amount of energy inside of you. It doesn't come from food, and it doesn't come from sleep. This energy is always available to you. Why? Because we know who we are. The energy that's available to us is that infinite energy that is the energy of the universe. It's life itself. It's available to each one of us. The only reason you don't feel this energy all the time is because you block it. You block it by closing your heart, by closing your mind, and by pulling yourself into that restrictive space that I talked about. And so we close it in response to experiences that we have had in the past, and then we become habituated to closing it. He goes on to say this, the problem is we don't exercise control. Under normal circumstances, our state of openness is left to psychological factors. Basically, we are programmed to open and close based on our past experiences. At first, it feels unnatural to leave it open, to leave your heart open, because the innate tendency is to close as a means of protection. But closing your heart does not really protect you from anything. It just cuts you off from your source of energy. And in the end, it only serves to lock you inside. And so what we are doing then is we are closing ourselves off. And so when we open the heart, we are opening ourselves to the infinite energy of the universe. And the fundamental question is, if we close ourselves off in protection, what's the fundamental question? Who am I protecting? Who or what am I protecting? If I know who I am, if we live out of the question from last week, who am I, and I know who I am, the infinite energy of the universe, the limitless abundant reality of love and life itself, if we know who that is, that doesn't need protection. That would be like saying spirit needed protection. And yet spirit is the power and presence and love and joy of life itself, absolutely radiating in all forms. It doesn't need any protection, it just needs to be expressed. It needs a place to be revealed, to be let out, to be experienced. And so what are we protecting? What and who or what we are protecting? He says this, you begin to realize that defining what you need in order to stay open actually ends up limiting you. Defining what you need in order to stay open actually ends up limiting you. Because what we're protecting, right, is that part of us that is afraid. It's that part of us that's scared. It's that part of us that says, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure. It's that part of us that says, oh, you look a lot like my dad. Oh, man, you really act like my mom. You act like those people. You seem like that person who did that horrible thing to me 25 years ago. You know, I've seen this experience before. I've been here before. I know how it's going to go down. I know what's going to happen, so I'm going to shut myself off. Right? How often do we have those experiences? And each time, out of that protection, out of that sense of protecting ourselves, we're simply locking ourselves inside, closing ourselves down from the reality of who we are. And we are protecting that, remember that sort of disturbed person, that insane maniac that we talked about last week? That's actually who we end up protecting. Isn't that, yeah, you have permission to laugh about that. That's like bizarre. That's like totally bizarre. The very thing that inner roommate that we talked about last week, that sort of disturbed maniac that's running around in our brains talking to us incessantly about all kinds of things, giving us terrible advice and having opinions about absolutely everything, that's actually who we're trying to protect. When in fact that is who we want to kick out of our coach. Those are the hidden beliefs and the false ideas and the old traumas that have no basis in reality because they aren't the spiritual truth of who we are. But we close down and we think what we're doing is we're protecting ourselves. No, actually we are protecting the lies. Damn. Okay, so that's the bad news, right? The good news is you can do something about that. You can do something about that, right? The key is don't close your heart. You want to keep your heart open? Don't close it. Okay, I get it. It's easier said than done. Totally get that. It's like you want to stop biting your fingernails, don't put your fingers in your mouth. That's Wayne Dyer's key, right? So I totally get it. But it is actually the answer. The answer is if you want to live an open-hearted life, what we have to do is not close it. So what we have to discover is what closes it, why do we feel the need to close it, and what would happen if we left it open? Wow, those are pretty amazing questions, isn't it? Aren't they? So we go back to our question from last week. When we feel ourselves shutting down, closing off, feeling that trigger of emotion, whatever that is, what's the question to ask? It's the same question we asked last week about our thoughts. We asked the same question about the emotional trigger that's happening, that sense of closing down. The question is, what part of me is being disturbed? What part of me is being disturbed? And what's being disturbed, I promise you, is not the peaceful, calm, poised, essential spiritual reality of who you are that is the infinite nature of the universe. Is it? No, that is not the part of us that's being disturbed. And so if it's anything other than that, it's not the truth of who we are. It's something that has become lodged in our reality, that has become lodged in our heart centers or in other energy centers. There's a beautiful section in the book, we're not going to go into it all. He has a beautiful description about how it is that we experience these things and receive them, and how they become stored, energetically stored in our bodies, and what it is that we do to each time that that gets triggered, and that energy, some of it gets released, and we're put right back into that place, right again, we're 12, or we're 4, or we're 9, or we're 32, or whatever it is, we're right in that space again, and we're feeling the feelings and having the thoughts as if it were happening in the moment. Because the energy that's being stored is being disturbed. It's the spider web is being wiggled. It's being disturbed, and the emotion and the energy is being released. And we feel it as emotions and hear it as thoughts. And then we go, oh my God, we can't have this happen again. And what happens? We shut down. And how do we know that we're shut down? How do we know that we're closed off? Is we feel it. We can feel ourselves closing down, contracting. Anything that feels as though it is pulling us back and away, shutting us down, closing us off, or anything that is pushing away, pushing away, pushing away. No, no. Either of those feelings is the way in which we close down and protect ourselves. So when we begin to do that, we can actually feel it. We can pay attention to what's happening. Now, he has a very interesting thing that he says. I really want to read you this quote, because I think it's just absolutely fascinating. Why do we do this? Why does this happen? Well, actually, originally it was a survival mechanism. We needed to know that fanged thing that was charging across the savannah at us, we needed to remember that was a bad thing. We needed to remember that when we saw it coming towards us, that we should run the opposite direction. We needed to discover that when we saw this fire happening, or when we saw things that were, or we realized that there was no food, that these were survival danger mechanism, things that were happening, and our survival protection mechanism would kick in. And we would energetically store the information, this is bad, don't let this happen. And it kept us alive. That's great. He said, we don't live in the savannah anymore, do we? We don't live in those experiences. And for us, 90% of what's thrown at us, probably 98% of what's thrown at us, is not about physical survival. Now, this is not true if you are being emotionally or physically or sexually abused in any way. If it's real abuse, if it's really physically harmful, you need to move, get out, get away. And yes, if it's physically true, then you must protect yourself, and you have mechanisms that are telling you that. But beyond that, if we're not into physical survival, what's trying to survive? Here's what he said. As a result of this evolution, that we live in the way that we live today, and not the way that we lived 5,000 years ago or 500,000 years ago, the protected energies have adapted toward defending the individual psychologically rather than physiologically. We now experience the daily need to defend our self-concepts rather than our bodies. Our major struggles end up being with our own inner fears, insecurities, and destructive behavior patterns, and not with outside forces at all. You withdraw, close down, and pull back behind your protective shield, and what you're actually doing is closing down your energy centers. You know exactly how to close down the centers to avoid being too receptive and sensitive to the different energies that are coming in and causing fear. So this is an adaptive mechanism that we have not yet evolved. We haven't consciously evolved this adaptive mechanism for ourselves so that we stop protecting the psychological reality, which we've already discovered isn't who we are. And from many of the mystic traditions, we recognize that actually we need to die daily. Our psychological self, actually, we need to let go of that psychological self so that we can discover the truth of who we are. That we are actually consciousness revealing itself in and through and as us. He goes on to say this: you will get to a point in your growth, your personal and spiritual growth, where you understand that if you protect yourself, you will never be free. If you continue to protect yourself, if we continue to protect our psychological maniac, it's living in our brains, we will never be free. Do you see? So the very protection mechanisms that we think we're doing to keep us safe are having the absolute opposite effect. He said, ultimately, if you protect yourself perfectly, you never need to grow. And you will never grow. All your habits and idiosyncrasies will stay exactly the same. Life becomes stagnant when people protect their stored issues. Because that's all we're protecting. We're protecting the emotional responses that we have and the thought responses that we have to the emotions that have been stored, that we've stored based on very real experiences that we had, but we made decisions about those real experiences, and we didn't process those real experiences as kids in the same way that we can as adults, and so they became stored. And even today, we're storing those experiences. We're storing them when we are unwilling to feel the feeling, tell the truth, have the conversation, do what needs to be done to move through it. Every time we avoid it, every time we suppress it, every time we push it down, push it away, don't want to deal with it, we are continuing to block these energy centers, and we're continuing to put things into our energy centers that close us down and that keep us closed. And these are the things that keep us from growing into the truth of who we are. If you really want to grow, you have to do the opposite. If you really want to grow, you have to do the opposite. Real spiritual growth happens when there is only one of you inside yourself. Remember we talked about that last week? No me, myself, and I? Right? No me and the inner maniac and the committee and all the people that are talking and all that stuff that's going on, and now we have all these triggered emotions that are happening, and now I'm 5, and now I'm 6, and now I'm 12, and right? When there's only one of us inside, right? That's not that, and there's real spiritual growth happens when there is only one of you inside. There's not a part that's scared and another part that's protecting the part that's scared. There's not a part that's trying to figure it out and another part that's afraid to look at it. There's only one. All parts are unified because there is no part of you that you're not willing to see. You're no longer divided within yourself. How do we do this seeing? How do we do this seeing? How do we ask this question, what part of me is being disturbed, and keep our hearts open? We do exactly what we said last week. We recognize that we are consciousness that is noticing what's happening. Remember we talked about that last week? We are aware of the fact that we are aware. That's enlightenment. To be aware of the fact that I'm aware is the very thing that gives me conscious control over my thoughts. It allows me to step back, just that tiny little gap, just before whatever was going to come out of my mouth, or whatever story I was going to start to tell, that moment where I can notice the thought. Here's the same thing. Consciousness, awareness, consciousness is about noticing, to be able to notice, I'm feeling like I'm closing down, I'm feeling something's getting triggered, I'm feeling the emotion rise, I'm feeling what's happening in my body, I'm feeling this. And you immediately know that this is not the spiritual truth of who you are. So therefore, it's not the I am that I am. It's not your consciousness that's having that. It's not you, your consciousness, that's having that. And so in that moment, you become consciousness noticing. And so now you can notice, you can take that moment, just that moment to step back and notice the rush of energetic that's happening, the rush of protection, the rush of push, the rush of fear, the rush of whatever it is, because part of you is being disturbed. And that is what's closing up and clogging up the energy center, and our thought is to slam it shut, which clearly makes it worse, right? So what we want to do is keep it open. The trick is not to close. Do you see? You are designed to be open. You don't actually have to open it. What we have to do is not close it. Yeah, big difference. Not close it. And how we not close it is by noticing it in that moment. So going back to Friday, in which I was celebrating Mother's Day, Susan and I have had very, very busy weeks, and we've got some number of busy weeks coming up. I'm working many weekends coming up. And so we had looked at our calendars and said, oh man, we've got this block of time Friday. We've got Friday from like noon to 6. We have an evening event. Let's just do something. Let's, be outside or spend the time together. Great, we'll do that. Okay, well then my son called up. Can we take you to lunch? Oh gosh, I looked at my calendar, his calendar. Friday was the only time we could do it. I called up Susan. Hey, sure, no problem. Of course you have to have Mother's Day with Jason. You go have Mother's Day with Jason. I'll work a little longer, and I'll come home, and then we'll have some time together. So, so that was cool. So I went and I got my hair done, and then I went to have see Jason, and then I got home 2:30. Susan wasn't home yet, and then she got home a little later. And I'd gotten busy. I was working on my daily words, and so then she just got busy on something else, and then she was getting busy on working on something for the evening event that we had. And I went in and I said to her, well, okay, I'm done now, I'm ready to play. And she was like, well, okay, I'm like busy now, and I'm working on this thing, and we really have to get it done for this evening. We need it for this evening. I thought we were going to spend time together. Okay, now, a good pout, I used to be able to get a good 5 days out of. Really, I'm serious. I could get a good 5 days out of a good pout. Okay, that was years ago. Okay, it doesn't fly so much anymore. But in that moment, you see, in that moment, I could have gone into a full-blown, full force ahead. Well, gosh, it just always works out this way. Nobody ever wants to spend time with me when I have time off. Nobody really loves me. I'm going to go eat worms. You know that? Singing, right? And we just go there like that, don't we? But I've been really paying attention to this, and I've been practicing our practice, right? Noticing that I'm noticing, being aware that I can be aware, and I've been reading this, getting prepared for today, and I thought, I'm closing down. I could feel it. I could feel myself starting to shut off and be prepared to be really mad. And I thought, oh wait, I was the one who first gave up the first hour of our time together. Why am I mad at her? Oh, I'm closing down. Okay, it was a little work not to close down. It was I pouted a little bit longer. I tried not to, I really did, but I did pout for a little longer. I went over and went by myself because I didn't want to actually pout in front of her because I was embarrassed that I was now pouting. So I went away and pouted for a few minutes, and then I came back and I tried to help with what we were doing, and then I was a little, okay, but the more we go, my only practice, don't close. That was the only practice. Don't close. Feel the feeling, feel the, whatever, blah, 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 and watch the thoughts go by. Don't close, just be present. Don't close, just be present. Allowing consciousness to notice what's going on, and just be present. And so I was able to relax and let it be. Life changed, Friday changed. And you know what? Susan and I we got to spend a few hours together. We worked on a project together. We got ready for the thing we were doing Friday night together. And we got to be together and do stuff together, and it was not how my brain had figured it out and how I wanted it to be, but there we were. I could relax and let it be. And I had all the energy I needed. Nothing was blocked or constricted or taken up by being angry or frustrated or upset or disappointed or pouting or whatever it is that you do, wherever it is that you go. Consciousness is about noticing. You are the consciousness that is having the thoughts or the feelings. You are the one. You are the I am that you are that is having these thoughts and feelings. And so it is when we have that moment where we can step back that we get to really experience this heart coherence, being coherent with the truth of who we are, being coherent with the energy of the universe. You don't fight the mind, he says. In fact, you don't even try to change it. You just make a game out of relaxing in the face of its melodrama. That's my melodrama. I pout. You simply learn how to release the tendency of getting drawn into the energy. Your center of consciousness is always stronger than the energy that is pulling on it. Always. You just have to be willing to exercise your will. Not your willpower, but your will. It's not a fight or a struggle. All the attractions, repulsions, thoughts, and feelings, really, they don't make any difference. They don't make you pure or impure. They don't keep you from being spiritual. They don't make you bad. They are not you. You are the one who's watching, and that one is pure consciousness. There's a place deep inside of you where consciousness touches the energy, and the energy touches the consciousness. That's where your work is. From that place, you let go, and you will break the ultimate habit, the constant draw of the lower self. You will then be free to explore the nature and source of your true being, pure consciousness. So that's what we'll be exploring for the next couple of weeks as we continue this process of noticing that we can notice. That's your practice for this week. Noticing that you can notice. That you can notice your thought. You can notice your emotion. You can notice the trigger. You can notice the closing down. In the noticing that you can notice, that is giving you the gift of your choice. Now, how will you respond? Let us pray. So, just taking a moment to breathe. Breathe into that heart space, really feeling it open. And actually knowing that it is open. It's always open. It's only when we close it that that's different. Its native state is open. So let us take a moment to feel that opening, resonate with that opening, allow it to be fully present in our hearts, in our minds. This is the truth of our being. This is the radiant, magnificent being of light and love that we are. This is how our light shines and our love radiates. And so let us this morning simply affirm that we choose not to close our hearts. Whatever it is, whatever going on, we allow ourselves to notice what part of us is being disturbed and to decide to choose to act from the truth of our being, from the love and the light, the joy and the presence of Spirit that is always right where we are. So we let it be, and so it is.